Hi guys, my name is Emily, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my December wrap-up. December was actually a really good reading month for me, a lot of higher star rated books. So let's start with the first book that I read in December, and that was The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night by Jen Campbell. So Jen Campbell is an author, a poet, a freelancer, a prize judging booktuber. I will link her down below just in case you don't know who Jen Campbell is. This is her short story collection. They are all very dark and strange and magical and fairy tale-ish. I really enjoyed them. My lowest rated story in this collection was actually the titular story, The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night. I gave that 2.5 stars out of 5 stars. My favorite story was Aunt Libby's Coffin Hotel. And so Aunt Libby's Coffin Hotel is about an aunt who sort of exploits grieving and death-obsessed people by giving them an opportunity to spend a night in a coffin, and then when the guests are tucked into their coffins, they're nailed into their coffins. Aunt Libby and her niece, I believe, go about manipulating the atmosphere so that people feel like they're having a supernatural, otherworldly experience. And like the whole island that this coffin hotel is on is being manipulated to be more spooky, more otherworldly, but at the same time, there does seem to be a hint that something actually otherworldly is happening, and I loved it. I loved it. It was so good. So again, like any short story collection, there were hits and misses, but overall, these were hits for me. They hit on a lot of things that I'm interested in: difference, disability, representation, folk and fairy stories. Even though the star ratings within the book are a little bit all over the place, most of them were 4 or 5 star reads, so I decided to give this book as an overall experience a 5 star. And I know that's not how percentages work. The next book I have here was an impulse buy. Sounded like it checked all of my boxes. We have fantasy literature, we have sister relationships, we have fairy tales, we have magic, and we have Northern European setting, because for some reason right now, folk and fairy stories that are more northern, I'm finding interesting. Should be like the perfect story, right? The book is The Sisters of the Winterwood by Rena Rossner. So this focuses on 2 sisters, Libba and Leah, who are just opposite in every way. Where one is big, the other is small. Where one is dark, the other is light. Where one is reclusive, the other is social. Where one is deeply devoted to her Jewish faith, the other is not so interested. So their parents receive news that the father's father from a different town is not well, he's dying, they should travel to see him and say goodbye, kind of thing. And it is deemed too dangerous for Jews to travel, and nobody has any travel permits, so what the parents are going to attempt to do is very dangerous, so they elect to leave their teenaged children alone in the woods in a town where there is already some tension between the Jews and non-Jews. All around them, there are conflicts, there are Jews being slaughtered, communities of Jews being slaughtered, and the parents are like, yeah, it's safer for you to stay in this town where things might erupt and you might be slaughtered than travel on the road with us to a specific Jewish community where our family lives. It's almost like children's literature parent logic there. So before the parents leave the girls alone, the parents separately let each girl in on a secret about the other girl. Because they are so opposed in their mindset and the way that they move through the world, naturally they have different approaches to the conflict they encounter. One of the central conflicts is the, I guess, hippy-dippy sister Leah meets these traveling non-Jewish boys in the market, and she buys their fruit, everyone loves their fruit, and she starts to date one of the boys. And Libba is of course opposed to this. Her father has said that they're not to marry, they have arranged marriages, she's going to be marrying a good Jewish boy, not this fancy pants traveling market guy who's not Jewish to boot, right? There's conflict there, but because they're not talking to each other, there's a deliberate failure to communicate. Things just fall apart and get worse and worse, and it all could have been solved by the parents just being open with information. So that annoyed me. The other thing that at first I thought was cool but quickly got annoying was the inclusion of complete phrases in Ukrainian, Hebrew, or Yiddish that were then immediately translated because it was assumed that very few English readers would be able to understand what had just been said. At first it was really cool because it was a reminder of where this story is taking place, in what sort of community this story is taking place. To be reminded of that every once in a while would have been okay, but the ways in which these phrases kept coming up and kept being immediately translated became annoying after a while, because obviously they're speaking these languages because they live there. I know they're not speaking English. I don't need that reminder like every few lines. And then because I don't speak these languages and the phrases being used weren't really like you know how in French there's mot ami? Like friendly words. If you know English, you can sort of guess what it is, like what the word is, even if you don't speak French. That kind of works in a lot of languages too, at least I find it does. So like just the sound of the word or the way it's written gives you an indication of like the friend word in English. The phrases and the things that were used either weren't short enough or common enough to be repeated and remembered. Like sometimes a book will introduce you to a term in another language, like maybe a term for grandmother. Like they'll be like, oh, like this is my grandmother, this is my abuela. And you're like, oh, okay, every time I see abuela, it means grandmother. And so after that, they don't have to be like, my abuela, my grandmother. They were long phrases that weren't things that you could learn and put into your vocabulary. It became tedious after a while and it detracted from the story itself. This was my lowest rated read. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I liked the fairy tale elements. I liked the Jewish folklore elements. I liked the historical elements, but I think the plot needed working on. The plot was almost intentionally messy for the sake of just being messy. You could still have explored all of those fairy tale elements while eliminating this massive intentional miscommunication on the parts of the parents. Disappointment. This was a 5-star prediction that did not pay off. The next book I have here, I have mixed feelings about, but ultimately gave 4 to 5 stars, and that is Educated by Tara Westover. So this is the story of a woman whose mentally ill father is paranoid about larger American structures, paranoid about the government, institutions like schools and banks and medicine. So his children don't have birth certificates, they don't go to school, they don't get any sort of formal education, they don't go to the hospital or the doctors when they are sick, they don't have vaccinations, they work in extremely unsafe family businesses, and they get hurt. They get seriously hurt, and again are not treated with anything other than herbal medicine and prayer. This is Tara Westover's journey from being this completely uneducated, isolated, dare I say it, a cult leader's daughter, to a highly educated woman. She has a MPhil in intellectual history and political thought from Trinity College, Cambridge, and she was a visiting fellow at Harvard University. She then got her PhD in history from Cambridge University. Part of it was absolutely fascinating. The other part was absolutely horrifying. This almost reads like dystopian fiction. I got so frustrated with her parents, the abuse and the neglect. It was a frustrating read, but an important read, so I gave it 4 to 5 stars. The next book I have here is 100 Hugs by Riddell. So this is just a book of little illustrations of various people, characters, creatures, giving each other hugs. And there are also little quotations about love throughout it, and I just think it's a really cute, heartfelt little book. It's the type of book that I would probably gift to a lot of people. Anyone who is going through a hard time, I would gift this little book to them. It's a reminder that you are loved, that things will get better, and I did enjoy this. The other little book I have here is Art Matters by Neil Gaiman and illustrated by Chris Riddell. So, oh, you can't see that. So this is just a reminder that art, creativity, education in the arts, studying the arts is worth it, that art can change the world, that stories can change the world, that what you are doing as a creative person is worthwhile, has value. I sort of fall into that art field, so this was good for me, but I feel like it's also a great giftable item for any new graduates of any sort of arts degree or arts program. Maybe you're not pursuing an arts education, but you want to do the art. This would be a good gift for that person. Just a little reminder that they can do it. I did really like this. The next book I have here is The Girl Who Saved Christmas by Matt Haig. So this is the second book in a little series. Right now there are 3 books out. So the first one I believe is called A Boy Called Christmas. It's sort of the backstory of Father Christmas, and then this is the story of a girl whose hope and faith in something good brought Christmas to everyone, enabled Father Christmas to deliver presents to everyone. And so when her mother dies and tragedy strikes the North Pole and Father Christmas is unable to deliver presents for one Christmas and do Christmas magic and make Christmas miracles, she loses her hope. And it is about Father Christmas reconnecting with this girl and bringing hope back into the world and saving Christmas, as the title suggests. It is very cute. Of course, it's kind of unseasonable to talk about it now, but if you have a little person in your life, the marketing category for this is middle grade, but I think if you read it out loud to younger kids as well, this is a very cute story, a very festive story to read around the time of the holidays, and I would recommend this. The last book I have here is an ARC. It is out now, but it wasn't when I got it, obviously, and that is The Wicked King by Holly Black. So this is the sequel to The Cruel Prince. I received an ARC for The Cruel Prince last year. I read it and loved it, and I've waited a whole year for this. This is a sequel, so it's hard to talk about it. The Cruel Prince is the story mostly of Jude. She is being raised by an adoptive father who is a fairy and who is also her biological parents' murderer. And as a mortal in the fairy world, she is a very low status, always sort of being picked on, having to be cautious, being abused in some way or another. The fairy find it fun. And so she does some political scheming. And at the beginning of this book, we see her as the puppet master for more political endeavors. And that's about all I can say without spoiling The Cruel Prince or this book. I liked it, although one of the things that I find like a little bit frustrating at this point is the inability to trust any fairy character. Humans have the ability to lie, fairies do not. They must tell the truth, but they are always looking for loopholes. And so every interaction that Jude has with a fairy, you can't really trust what's being said. Sometimes things that seem fairly straightforward, like the rug will get pulled out from under you because there's a fairy loophole that you didn't realize. At first, those twists are fun, but when they happen too often, it's like, well, okay, we needed some more drama, so fairy loophole. I will read the next book. I'm not as hyped for the third book as I was for The Wicked King. So those are the books that I read in the month of December. Let me know your thoughts on these books in the comments down below. Have you read any of them? Did you enjoy any of them? If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. That would be cool. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon.